Thank you guys for being here. We are in session 5 of our study in hidden sadness. For those of you who have not been able to make it all the way through, we do have most of the sessions recorded online. Unfortunately, last week's session did not get recorded, so that was the only blank in the 5 weeks. But the other 3 are online and able for your reference. If you guys remember, we have journeyed from beginning at looking at hope and the reality of depression, considering that depression is real, and we saw some of it from the scriptures, but yet, even though it is real, there is hope for those who are in it. And second session, we dealt with the battle of the mind. What we do with our mind matters, and Brother Laramie helped us from Psalm 42 and 43. Whenever he asked the question, why are you downcast, O my soul? Like, how do we actually rightly encourage ourselves to rightly transform our thinking, lead our thinking away from looking at the weightiness of life, but yet to put our minds on Christ? And then week 3, Jimmy Kinnaird helped us in understanding the, what was it? Anybody, pop quiz, anybody know what his subject matter was? It was Psalm 13, so it was a case study from the Psalms on dealing with David's darkness. And seeing that this right here, the lamenting that God has given us in some instructions in His Word on how to lament and lament rightly and lament well without doubting and forsaking God. And then last week, Brother Drew Archer helped us with understanding how to listen to depression and all the things that press in and cause depression. So this session is about what is your role in somebody else's trouble. And the aim of this session is that you will walk away with some kind of framework that you actually can feel not only encouraged but equipped to actually be willing to step in the troubles of other people. No matter how we feel, inadequate or adequate, equipped or ill-equipped, if we're honest, if you are filled with the Spirit, you have all that you need to be able to speak to those who are in troubled times. We all face with trouble. I don't know if you've lived in the past 2 weeks with the Nelsons, you would see the troubles that we have endured. And comparatively speaking, some of it was insignificant, but as you know, it's trouble upon trouble upon trouble that begins to break the spirit, and eventually what we do in that breaking really matters, and sometimes that breaking is for our good. Christ said, unless a seed falls to the ground and does what? Dies. Life cannot happen. So there is a certain breaking. But what we do with that breaking really does matter, because we can either turn inward to it, swim in it, or we can raise our gaze and behold the Holy One, and then we can help others do the same, so we will actually have true and abiding hope. I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but troubles of life, they do not have a preference. Troubles does not discriminate. It doesn't matter how much money you have or how little money you have, how old you are or how young you are. If you live 15 minutes in the world, you really see that the troubles do abound and no one is immune to it. Jesus actually made that a promise in John 16:33. He says, in me you shall have peace. That's territorial. That's locational. In me you shall have peace. But in the world you shall have what? Tribulation. You have trouble. In the world you will have trouble. In me you will have peace. And he says, take heart. I have overcome the world. One of the great troubles that we have to help ourselves and others realize is as we swim in the waters of the world, we should only anticipate troubles, but as we swim in the waters of Christ, there is peace. Some people, as you know, struggle for short periods of time. There's a such thing as called seasonal depression, or even you can say holiday depression. Certain times of the year does it for people, whether it be an anniversary of a death, whether it be you go to Ohio and you spend 6 months there from November to April, and you're going to find yourself saying, man, where's the sun? The sun is actually a form of happiness. But yet you live in that gray area and you realize, man, this is a daunting, sad place. Some people live in depression for an extended season, and some it's their entire lives. And there's reasons why, some that we can actually pinpoint, others we really don't know how or figure out. So some reasons that people could live in depression or be in depression could be because they have a natural disposition towards it. Some people are just sad people. Some people it's because of their own personal sins. David says in Psalm 32, when I did not confess my sin to the Lord, I wasted away like the noonday. But yet when I confess it to the Lord, He forgave me the guilt. Some people, they're in the depression because they took a trouble and they dwelt upon it, which only magnified it. Then they dwelt upon it some more, and they only magnified it. They dwelt upon some more, which only magnifies it. And instead of raising their gaze, they go deep into the mire of sadness and depression and disappointment. And then some have some physiological issues. Stress, anxiety, cancer, sickness, all those begin to play a part on one's spiritual disposition. And all that plays a part in how one ends up in the darkness. And sometimes people are in the darkness and they don't even know why. There's not a pinpointing explanation that could be had. But the reality of it is, what do you do in that moment? How do you help someone who's in that dark place? How do you help someone who is in a troubled state, with a troubled soul, actually have somewhat of a hope, somewhat of a light, somewhat of a desire to want to press on? Those become real questions. And I know all of you in this room have that desire, not only for yourselves, but also for those whom you get to love and help, for else you wouldn't be here this evening. How do we actually help those who are battling real life challenges that have put such a weight on the soul, where hope tends to evade and only sorrows begin to rise? Battling depression, sadness, grief, anxiety, whatever you want to call it. All of it presses in on the same place. It presses in on the soul. So that's what I'm hoping to do tonight, is to give some sort of framework to be able to help you as you help yourself and you help others as you walk away from here and you step out into real life, as you help others in real life. I hope that your disposition, maybe not after tonight, but yet you will see that you really have the ability to help people, that your mantra of life will be what my mentor said. And I think I may have even said this in the first session, but he had a plaque on his desk and it said, "Bad news, welcome here." What a disposition that someone, no matter their troubles, has a place to come and actually share that grief, even if you don't know what to do with it. I don't know if you realize how far a hug goes, how far a listening ear goes, but those really do mean something. So as somebody does come to you, obviously the one thing you don't want to do is shut it down. You don't want to avoid it, but yet you do want to welcome it, because everybody's pain is real to them. Everybody's sadness is real to them. Your place, my place, is to help them get away from the sadness and get into the hope that is in Christ. Now, I do want to add a disclaimer. What I'm talking about tonight is going to be you being able to help on a normal, average, everyday level of troubles. And I do believe that if everybody had a practice of actually being vulnerable and transparent with their troubles with some trusted friends, that the depth of depression, the depth of anxiety, the depth of grief would not be so deep. I acknowledge that there are cases that it requires somebody who's far more studied, far more experienced, and has walked with the deep, dark places of other people so that they have some kind of wisdom to be able to share. But I would say those cases, even though it seems like they are becoming more abundant today, on an everyday average level, as a sense of protection before somebody even gets to that place where they need somebody who's in a real equipped position, you can help somebody long before they end up there. It's almost like you go to your general practitioner on a maintenance level before you ever get to the sickness. And whenever the cancer comes in, okay, now the general practitioner just can't help. He's going to send you to a specialist. The same issues go with the soul, but the aim of it is that we are working and nourishing ourselves and helping others that they would never end up in that sick spot. Now, there are some organizations that I fully love and embrace their philosophy of counseling. I'm going to give you, I think there's 3 or 4 here. Obviously, I'm an advocate for biblical counseling, and there's organizations like the Christian Counseling and Education Foundation, CCEF, which Ed Welch was part of or is part of. There is the Association of Certified Biblical Counselors, also known as ACBC, which one of my professors was pretty high up, or still is pretty high up in there. And then there's the Institute for Biblical Counseling and Discipleship, or IBCD. Those are some where if you need somebody to help you, help someone else, or you yourself needs real abiding, deeper help, or you need to refer someone, those are 3 sound biblical counseling people who have walked through the deepest and darkest of places and who take the person as a whole person. Mind, body, and soul. So, tonight we're going to do this in 2 parts, and then the second part's got 4 parts. So, just to make it a little bit of confusing for you. So, we're going to talk about the need for relationships, and then bearing the troubles. The need for relationships and bearing the troubles. And that's going to be our framework for tonight, and then bearing the troubles, we'll see there's going to be 4 steps, if you will, to bearing someone else's trouble. So, the need for relationships. This right here is a fundamental principle of living life in the world because we are human beings and we're made for relationships. Now, pop quiz. We're going to make this a little bit of back and forth here. Genesis 1, what is the pinnacle of Genesis 1? Creation. What is the pinnacle of creation? Man. And why is man the pinnacle of creation? Because we're made in God's image. If you ever wonder why you yourself desire to be in relationship and loneliness is an aversion, it is because you were made in the image of God. God, by His very nature, is relational God. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Perfect harmony, perfect love, perfect relationship long before He created man. Get this, God did not make man because He was lonely. God did not make man because He needed companions. God made man as an expression of who He already is. So you and I are relational beings by the very imago Dei that we're made in, the very image of God that we are made in. So if you ever wonder why loneliness is such a bore, it's because God did not design you to be lonely. He designed you to be in relationship. And we know those relationships fall in 2 different categories, which they are inseparable. Your relationship to God and your relationship to other people. This is just part and parcel of being image bearers of God. The loneliest place on earth is to be lonely. Doesn't matter where you're at. If you are a lonely individual, you could be in a crowded room and still have that great daunting sense of loneliness. Loneliness is one of those compelling emotional states that someone says, why is life even worth living? The questions that people begin to ask, such as, what does it matter? No one cares. That question there is a heartbreaking question. Because a person who gets to a place where they say, no one cares, expresses the greatest agony of their soul, which is they are ultimately alone. From the very onset of creation, God says something. Now, He said it to the man, but the principle applies to everyone. It is not good for man to be what? Alone. Therefore, He made him a helper. That principle now, it shows up in the marriage relationship, but that principle isn't just isolated to Adam needing a wife. We as people made in the image of God are in need of each other. We are in need of others because we bear a life that is too big and too much for us to bear it alone, because life will throw you problems. Praise God, we have Christ, but Adam and Eve, they did something. They were in perfect harmony with God, perfect relationship with each other, and then Eve decided to do something that was unwholesome and unkind to all of us. She ate of the forbidden fruit. So sin enters into the world, and now what comes into the world is pain and suffering. So now man doesn't just need a help to do his work, he needs a help to navigate life. God has given us parents to love us and nurture us. He's given us children for us to teach and lead. He has given us mentors to impart wisdom and direction. He has given us teachers for us to learn. He has given us pastors and spiritual brothers and sisters to care for our souls. All of these are needed by God's design. You need someone else. I know in our American way, we're very independent. That word, I need you, or that phrase, I need you, we don't like to say. But truthfully, if we're being honest, that's something that we need. We need to own it, we need to realize it, and we need to live it. Loneliness and brokenness of relationships is a product of sin and living in a cursed world, but also that brokenness and loneliness tells us that we need other broken people to help us in our brokenness by God's design. When people begin to isolate themselves, there's a warning in the Proverbs about one who isolates himself. Whoever isolates himself, Proverbs 18:1, it says, whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. He breaks out against all sound judgment. For one to isolate themselves or to be isolated is only to their pain, only to their detriment, only to their intense or enhanced sorrow. Because loneliness, whether we like it or not, loneliness is a killer. We were not meant to be alone. We're never meant to do life alone. And if we understand that on the front end of it, whether it's the issues of our own heart or the heart of other people, we understand that this moment here, when I'm face to face with another person, is not by accident, but it's intended to be a relational help. Even psychologists acknowledge this. Julianne Holt Lundstad, this is what she said, and looking at the troubles of the world in relation to isolation. She says, there is robust evidence that social isolation and loneliness significantly increase risk of premature mortality, and the magnitude of the risk exceeds that of many leading health indicators. Just to say what she just said again, premature mortality is linked to loneliness. People who are lonely live shorter lives. And she says the magnitude of the risk exceeds that of many leading health indicators. Now, I didn't look at the statistics and I didn't verify her data here because there was no cross-referencing, but it is interesting to think that loneliness is such a plague on the soul that it even outdoes, if you will, the risk exceeds that of other health indicators, which we probably could throw in cholesterol, high blood pressure, and all those other physiological issues. She goes on to say this, regardless of whether loneliness is increasing or remaining stable, we have lots of evidence that a significant portion of the population is affected by it. Being connected to others socially is widely considered a fundamental human need, crucial to both well-being and survival. Now, I don't know anything about this lady's education. I don't know what her background is. I just know that she was on the Brigham Young website when I found this article, and I found the article very insightful. But we can explain the why. The reason why people have troubles with loneliness is because they were designed to be something different. And we know the answer. The answer isn't solely in relationship with people. The answer is in relationship to God. Romans 5. Paul says that we, being justified by Christ, now have peace with God. So relationships are a means of being emotionally and mentally healthy. Disclaimer, your relationships, your types of relationships matter. Paul says bad company does what? It corrupts. So your company that you keep really do matter. Either they're going to be a help to you or a hurt to you. The quality of your friendship does matter. There's wisdom needed in the quality of friends. In order for you to have a healthy state of being, you must have good friends who will help you go in that direction. Be a good friend to help someone else go in that direction. And the ultimate thing, if Christ is not the end goal, your help is only going to get them so far. If Christ is the just more of an asterisk or like, hey, can I just add this on at the end? If he is not the end goal, your counsel, your help is only going to get them so far. Apart from the hope of Christ, apart from the soul being revived, made new, there's no real true help to be ultimately had. It may carry them along for a season, but it doesn't heal the soul. Proverbs 27:6 says, faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. Either you could be a good friend to someone, love them well, and speak truths to them, or you can affirm them in their position. Proverbs 18:24. A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. A good friend will not depart from you. You being a good friend will not depart from those who are in their darkest time of needs. Bad company, many companions, it comes to ruin. But there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. It's these types of quality relationships that we must be and must have if we're going to help others and even help ourselves as we seek to grow in wholesomeness and wholeness and overcome the darkness and the pain. So relationships are one of those things we have to acknowledge on the front end of this, that we need relationships. There is no, I will figure it out, I'm strong enough, I will get by, or it'll all work itself out, or it will get better. No, there's a humble acknowledgement that we need other people. Even if it's just like, hey, hear me out and let me know if I'm thinking rightly on these matters. So often we come to our own conclusions about a matter and not realize that we're actually seeking affirmation and not help. So we find people that only affirm us. But being a good friend is going to speak the truth in love, not letting kindness and truth leave you. So that's the need for relationships. We must acknowledge relationships are what we need. Without those relationships, we truly cannot get better, and nor can we truly help others. So now, bearing the troubles in the relationship. And this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where you yourself have to be willing and able to step into someone else's mess with a purpose. Not just to be a companion, but actually to help them conform, help them heal, help them be better, and help them do better. Sin has impacted every facet of this contaminated planet. It is a lived reality. It's a reality that we can expect hardships, but God in His kindness has not only given us prescriptions in His Word, but He's also given us people to help us apply those prescriptions. He's baked into His way of caring for us the solution for our everyday woes in the Scriptures from the mouths of His people. Relationship with Him and relationship with others. Just a few texts before we jump into 4 points. Psalm 34:15. The eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous, and His ears toward their cry. Galatians 6:2. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. And Romans 12:15. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. Every single instance for this to be exercised requires relationship. Relationship with God and relationship with others. So that's God's provision for us during our troubled times, is His people to care for us in deep and abiding ways. So here's the 4 points that we're going to look at real quick. 1, in order to bear each other's troubles, you must enter into the person's world. You must enter into the person's world. 2, you must identify with their suffering. Identify with their suffering. 3, point them to Christ. Point them to Christ. And then 4, help them put in the work. Help them put in the work. So that's going to be the 4 points for the rest of our time together. Enter into the person's world. Now that sounds kind of interesting when you think about entering into somebody's world. It's almost like you're parachuting in. You're just dropping in, hey, I'm here to help solve all your emotional woes. And it's not that at all. The real reality of it is you cannot weep with those who weep and mourn with those who mourn without stepping into their world. And it's not waiting in the behind the scenes. It's really saying, hey, I've noticed this about you. Can I help you? How can I pray for you? The first step in bearing one's troubles is you must step into their world. Now, Job gives us an interesting case study of this very scenario. How many friends did Job have on the front end? He has 3 friends. Now, Job, he suffered immensely. He lost his wealth. He lost his family. He was stuck with a wife who was not a great big help to him. He lost his health. And then he got 3 friends. And these 3 friends on the front end of it, man, you think they're going to be great friends. Because what's the first thing they did? They stepped into his trouble. They came to him. And they saw his condition. And they tore their robes and they wept. They wept. What good friends do we have here? They sat with Job. How many days? 7 days. Didn't say a word. I know many of you, probably myself included, can't even get past 5 minutes. Like, bro, can I help you out here? I got a word for you. Listen to me. No, they sat with him for 7 days. And then they opened their mouths because Job opened his. And do you realize it was Job who spoke first? And do you know what Job's first words in Job 3 were? Was all negative. He had been living in his head for so long, for those days, just thinking, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? Why are my kids gone? Why is my wealth gone? Why is my health gone? And in Job's thinking, the first things out of his mouth, go with me to Job chapter 3. And let's behold what Job says, because this is very instructive for us. Job chapter 3, it says, after this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. And Job said, let the day perish on which I was born, and the night that said, a man is conceived. Let that day be darkness, may God above not seek it, nor light shine upon it. Let gloom and deep darkness claim it. Let clouds dwell upon it. Let the blackness of the day terrify it. Man, Job's first words, the one who had most recently said, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Shall we only receive good and not evil from God? As he meditated on his woes, his conclusion was, let the day on which I was born perish. And his friends had an opportunity at that moment to help Job. But yet when they spoke, what do they do? They begin to say, Job, what sin have you committed? Job, this man in anguish, this man in pain, and his words, even though they were wrong words, his friends should not have compounded it. They did not enter into his world, even though they showed up in a seemingly good way. They didn't listen. And that's the key to entering into someone's world is listening. The first thing one must do is they must learn to listen. One of the great problems of the human condition is we listen to respond instead of listening to understand. We must listen so that we can understand why someone feels the way they feel. What words are they using? What expressions are they saying? In order to help someone, we must first seek to understand. In order for us to understand, we must listen to them. The sin is never, ever can we justify sin, but yet there may be an explanation. Why are you acting out this way? Why are you responding to these turmoils in these ways? One thing that happened to me that helped me broaden my perspective on especially emotional and behavioral change, especially behavioral change that is abnormal or uncharacteristic for children, was I listened to this neurologist speak of his nephew. Nephew was, by and large, characteristically a very sweet kid, very loving, very giving, and all of a sudden he started having outbursts of anger, really defiant behavioral issues. And since it was so abnormal, it was black and white, he did a scan on his brain. And do you know what they found on his brain? Between the two spheres of his brain, the left and right, there was a tumor. And once that tumor was removed, guess what that kid's disposition was? Back to normal. Like the sin is never justified, but yet there may be something to explain it. So we must listen. You know, some people, when they express disappointment, when they express grief and regret, those things, there's something going to be underlying it. And like I said, we can never justify the sin, but yet, you know, we are sinners too, so we could show a little compassion, which goes a long way just by listening. Proverbs 25. The purpose in a man's heart is like deep water, but a man of understanding will do what? He will draw it out. I don't know why you're going through what you're going through. I don't know why you are sinning the way you're sinning. I don't know why you're responding the way you're responding. I don't know why you're doubting God. Let me understand. And a lot of times when we understand, then we can actually apply the right kind of counsel, the right kind of help. James 1:19, you guys know this one all too well. Know this, my beloved brothers. Let a person be quick to hear and slow to speak and slow to anger. When I was on a coaching team with my Titus's team, one of the coaches always told the kids, because they were chitty-chatty all the time, he's like, hey, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Exercise listening twice as much as you speak. But listening well gives you an ability to understand the deeper issues of the heart, not solely what you see on the surface. Not everything is because someone is being rebellious or defiant. Some of it is going to be held on to unhealed griefs, unhealed, whether you call it trauma or historical baggage, whatever term you like to use. The issue is there's trouble. And there's trouble that's plaguing the soul. And it's whenever something is agitated, it doesn't take a whole lot of additional heat to cause it to boil. We have friends who struggle with miscarriages, and one set of friends, they lost 2 kids in 6 months. And the first one, they counseled themselves well. They trusted the Lord. The second one was, why is God doing this to me? Their mind of who God is and their understanding of what God does began to change, and they began to put God on the hot seat as if God was doing some kind of wrong. At that moment is where, let's slow down here. I could totally sympathize why you feel the way you do. But let's not redefine God in the process. So let's walk slowly. Let's understand. I know that you're feeling loss. Let's wade through this together. Disappointments. Who in here has ever been disappointed? We can go on the disappointment scale all day long. And I think a lot of people and their sadness, their grief, their woes, especially those who get older, disappointments become what drives someone into the darkness. And if we're being honest, disappointments really are resident idols in our heart. It's because we wanted something that God did not deliver. I want something my way, and when I don't get it, it fails. And then it happens again, and it happens again. I expected my life to look this way by the time I was 25, 35, 45, and my life is completely different. Ultimate disappointments happen. Disappointment in and of itself is not bad. It's what we do with it and what causes it. Disappointments are symptomatic of resident idols. Take Job, for instance. Job went from blessing the Lord to cursing the day of his birth. He was disappointed that his life was completely wrecked. What you do with that matters. Entering into a person's world with the desire to listen and understand helps them weed out those things that hinder them from seeing God fully. So that's the first point, is enter into the person's world by listening, and listening to understand, not listening to respond. Secondly is identify with their suffering. Identify with their suffering. Even though you may think this suffering is folly, trivial, silly, it's still a suffering to them. So being able to identify with someone's suffering gives you a pathway to speak hard truths into their lives. To dismiss it outright and to say that what you're doing is just being childish, you need to grow up, those kind of languages don't help build bridges to healing. It begins to tear down people's trust. To identify with someone's suffering, even in the most insignificant way, is a pathway to be able to speak hard truths into their heart. And to be able to do so with tactfulness and with kindness. If we're being honest, we too have been expressive in our trivial disappointments. So much so that we've actually caused relationships to be broken. We deal with trivial things every single day. But yet, in those moments, what we do with it either A, builds someone up or breaks them down. So when we identify with their suffering, what we're doing is saying, you know what? I don't have a unique experience. You don't have a unique experience. We all live under a sin-cursed world, and there's nothing new under the sun. To acknowledge it with them is to show them that you care. But yet your aim is to get them from that, even if it's trivial or deep, and to get them to a place of healing. I had a guy, and I've told this story a few times to a few of you, so bear with me as I tell it again. This guy, he was on the phone, angry, yelling out so many explicitives. My kids are there, and I knew his level of anger. And I told my kids to go inside because I knew if this guy right here, all he had to do was look at me in the right way, and all that anger was being taken out on me and potentially on my boys. He comes to me about 2 weeks later and apologizes. I'm sorry for the way I acted. I should have been better. I should have done better. And I let him speak. And then I just said to him these words, I don't know what you're going through, but I know the one who does, and I know the one who cares. And by me saying that, that was almost like an open door for him or permission for him to be vulnerable. And you know what that brother did? He began to weep. He had a relationship that he had been in for a long period of time, came to an end. His daughter he hasn't seen in 6 to 8 months. Like all this pain that he had been harboring, finally we just had a place to undo. I could have said to him, you're right, and I never want to see you or hear you speaking in front of my kids that language again, which would have cut that opportunity off. But because I was willing to say, look, man, I know you. I don't know what you're going through, but I know the one who does, because I know you're going through something. We spent 6 to 8 months with him, began to open up God's Word together, and he began to improve. Now, I don't know what his life is like now. We haven't been in contact. But there's a principle to be had about building pathways instead of building walls. Stepping in or identifying with someone's suffering is a way to do that. Jesus does that with us. Hebrews 2, 10 through 12. For it was fitting that he, for whom and by whom all things exist, and bringing many sons to glory, should make the founder of their salvation perfect through suffering. For he who sanctifies and those who are sanctified all have one source. That is why he is not ashamed to call them brothers, saying, I will tell your name to my brothers. In the midst of the congregation, I will sing your praises. Jesus himself suffered, and he relates to our suffering. Hebrews 4:15. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Jesus doesn't ignore our troubles, even the trivial ones, but he takes a personal interest in them. So may we do the same with others. May we identify with the troubles of others. I know what you're going through. I may not understand it. I may not even say that I can fully grasp and lead you in the right way, but I can tell you what I can do. I can love you in this moment. I can identify with your troubles because I too have felt them. Third, as you enter into a person's world, listening to understand, you identify with their suffering, the ultimate thing is to point them to Christ. Hebrews 12, 2 and 3 says, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. The ultimate answer to all of our life's woes is a greater view and vision of who Christ is. Apart from having a greater view of who Christ is, we will only grow weary or faint-hearted. But the author of Hebrews tells us, look to Jesus. So you need to help someone raise their gaze, even if it's in the most insignificant manner. Because he says, consider him who endured from sinners such hostility, so that, purpose clause, you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. If someone is in Christ, that right there should be easy path. When somebody's outside of Christ, now it's a call. It's a call to the one to say, Jesus stands with his arms open wide. Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden. You need to run to Jesus. You need to point people to Christ. If we truly believe that Jesus is our greatest help in our time of need, we need to point people to him. If we truly believe that there's only one power in all of the universe that actually can change the heart and the mind of people and actually help people, heal people, help people overcome, it is Jesus. We need to point people to Jesus. If we believe Jesus is the light of the world, then let's introduce him to those who are in the darkness. If we believe that Jesus is our only hope, then let's introduce him to those who are hopeless. If we believe that Jesus is the only way, then let's introduce him to those who are lost. So let's enter into a person's world, identify with their suffering, and 3, point them to Christ, and then 4, help them put in the work. Help them put in the work. Now, at this point, this is where really your help to someone matters. Because now at the end of it, you can't just point them to Christ and then bail out. Now it's your responsibility, my responsibility, to walk with them as they seek to do this with others. Without the effort to overcome, one will only continue to wallow in an unhealthy place. You cannot do it for them. They cannot do it for you. We have to bear personal responsibility for ourselves. So helping them by nudging them along is what we need to do. Pacing isn't what we're after. We don't want somebody to go from A to Z in 3 days. This may be a year, 2 year, 3 year kind of process. The pacing isn't what's significant. It's the helping them put in the work as they seek to be healed by God as a means of healing. Here's a statement. It says, being a good friend means that you patiently but progressively are helping one who is only digging themselves a deeper misery pit. Being a good friend means that you patiently but progressively are helping one who is only digging themselves a deeper misery pit. Patiently, but there needs to be progress. So your aim is always progressive. 1 Thessalonians 5:14. And we urge you, brothers, admonish the idle, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak. Be patient with them all. Admonish, warn those who are lazy, those who are not doing, those who are, some of your translations may say rebuke, but it says admonished, warn. Encourage the faint-hearted, those who are growing weary. Encourage them, and then you help the weak. It is the one who's broken, battered, who needs somebody to actually carry them along. But be patient with them all. Acts 20, 31 through 32, Paul says this to the Ephesian elders. He says, therefore be alert, remembering that for 3 years I did not cease night or day to admonish everyone with tears. And now I commend you to God and to the word of his grace, which is able to build you up and to give you the inheritance among all of those who are sanctified. Colossians 1, 28, 29. Him we proclaim, warning everyone and teaching everyone with all wisdom, that we may present everyone mature in Christ. For this I toil, struggling with all his energy, that he powerfully works within me. So the aim that we must do in the person as we seek to help them is to help them grow and become ones who can stand on their feet. This may mean that you give up some of your time, that you actually meet with somebody on a regular basis, that you open up a book such as Depression, Looking Up from the Stubborn Darkness together. It may mean that you do a study from God's Word together. It may mean you have them journal their thoughts and that you sit at the end of the week and say, let's talk that through. How is your mind changing? It may mean that you say, I'm going to give up my evening so that I can partner with you in a particular study group that's going to be to your benefit. It may mean that you don't just show up at church without them. It means you go and pick them up and get them to church, because being in the company of God's people is an area where they need to be if there's going to be true help. But helping, making progress is what's significantly important in one's healing. And this is something that you cannot do alone. We are called into community, not into individual relationships. So the people of God matter. God has given us the community of saints. Proverbs 11:14. Where there is no guidance, the people fail. But in an abundance of counselors, there is safety. So one thing that I like to do when I'm trying to help somebody along is to get them into 4 particular exercises or habits. And I see these as a way of God's protection, or as like they would like to say in the theological world, these are means of grace. the Bible. If one is not filling their mind with the Bible, they're being conformed to the world. And if you conform to the world, you only add more trouble. So the Bible, they must be in the Bible. Prayer, access to God through prayer is a comfort to the soul. You cannot be so interesting if one actually begins to rightly worship the Lord through praying. One cannot be in a despondent, perpetual grumbling kind of posture. We see that even with the lament psalms, there's always a leading to something healthier. The psalmist always goes from his complaint to recognize who God is and his corrective. And that's what happens as we engage with God through praying. Cast your cares upon him, for he cares for you. The third is being with God's people. You are a means of God's extended mercy and kindness in the lives of other people. You have ears to be able to hear people. You have a mouth to be able to encourage people. And you got hands to be able to help people. God's people cannot be absent in the healing process. And then 4, an encouragement towards obedience. An encouragement towards obedience. Obedience is not a secondary matter. It's a primary matter. We live in a really interesting day and age where we compare and we want to protect the doctrines of grace or the idea of justification by faith alone where our obedience doesn't matter. No, your obedience does matter. The difference is your obedience is going to be to your healing or to your hurting. Our obedience matters. Obedience to love and serve one another inside the household of God, and a call to evangelize those outside of the household of God. The ultimate end of the one another is that we get our eyes off of us and our woes, that we get them on who God is and his people and those who need him. The more we focus on ourselves, what ends up happening? What's the outcome, the logical outcome of focusing so much on self? Misery. I tell my kids this all the time. The pathway to misery is through selfishness. You want to be a miserable person? Pursue yourself. All those things that the world tells you is going to make you happy is only going to bring you misery. God has not designed us to be constant receivers. Christ tells us it's better to do one thing than to do the other. It's better to give than receive. There's something in God's ways by us giving of ourselves over to the lives of other people for God's glory that God does something in us. He heals us. He transforms us. And it's our obedience. It's walking, trusting that his ways are better than mine. Psalm 27:4, and I'll close with this. David says this. He says, the one thing that I have asked of the Lord that I shall seek. One thing that I may behold the beauty of the Lord and gaze in his temple and dwell and meditate. Ultimately, David wanted God. That's what he wanted. But David in Psalm 43, he says that I will go to God, my exceeding joy, in the company of his saints. You cannot separate God from his people like you cannot separate God from his word. And we cannot separate our faith from our practice. God heals us in all those ways. So really, if you wanted a framework, it's really those easy points. Enter into someone's world. Identify with their suffering. Point them to Christ and help them put in the work. And the work habits we want is time in the Bible, time in praying, spent with his people, and walking in obedience. Well, this wraps up the 5 weeks. And this right here is somewhat of a capstone. That you take what you've learned already and now you begin to apply it in other people's lives. And I promise you this, if you're willing to say, Lord, here I am, send me, even I don't feel adequate enough for it, what do you think the Lord's going to do? He's going to fill up what is lacking in your faith. He's going to use you. And you're going to walk away and say, why did I ever doubt God? There's times where I'm thinking like, this is too big for me, Lord. I don't know what to say. And all of a sudden, something like Philippians 4 comes to mind. Do not be anxious about anything, but by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, make your request known to God. And the peace of God, which God, surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. And all of a sudden, I'm like, I don't know what else to say, but I know that. You know what? Can we just obey God right here and do this? And it's amazing what God does if we trust him. So let us do that.